How do you pitch a complex idea? That's the challenge confronting a group of crack medical engineers at a top business school for whom I'll be running a session on pitching skills later today. That's why I'm dressed up smart. But of course, they're not alone. For so many of us in the workplace, that's a relevant challenge, namely how to cut through the complexity to engage our audience, whether that audience is perhaps prospective investors, could be clients, customers, colleagues perhaps. What can we do to give ourselves the best chance of actually securing buy-in to our idea? Maybe it's a new product or a service, or it could be some other kind of proposal, especially if it's complex. There's all sorts of pitfalls. Well, here's an idea for you to consider, and it will form the core of the session I'm running later this afternoon with the medical engineers, which is why it's on my mind today. And it's this: make your opening relatable. The key word there being the word relatable. Now, sounds obvious, doesn't it? I mean, why wouldn't you want to make it relatable? Well, so many people make the mistake of delivering a pitch, which is anything but. They go in at a level that is too high, relies too much knowledge and expertise on the part of the audience, too complex, goes into too much detail, goes on for too long, spend lots of time just describing features of the idea, and the audience sits there going, well, so what? Who cares? Why should I care about this? So what does relatability mean? Well, it can mean a number of things, and actually creativity here often becomes quite important. It means, for example, framing the problem early so that people get a sense for why this idea might matter. And that helps to make it relevant. But even then, if you talk about the problem in the wrong way or in a way that's too complex, then you can still end up losing people. So let me give a couple of examples to bring this idea to life. One comes from some coaching that I did a couple of years ago for the chief exec of a social enterprise focused on the recycling of rubber, in particular used car tires. Now, turns out to recycle, to make rubber recyclable, it's quite a complex process. It involves all sorts of clever chemistry in order to extract a resource called the carbon black from the tire, which can then be reused and so on to reduce wastage. It's really quite tricky. And when I first met with the chief exec of this particular organization, she said to me, yeah, I'm finding that when I'm pitching this idea, audience members are struggling to get their heads around the science. To which, as a historian, I have to say, my reaction was, I'm not surprised. I'm finding it difficult to get my head around the science, and we've been talking about it for 10 or 15 minutes. So we worked it through and thought, right, how can we make this more relatable? Well, not long after, this particular lady, chief exec, she stepped up and pitched her idea, or her business, I should say, to an audience of about 2,000 people at the TNW conference in Amsterdam. So it's a pretty big audience, high stakes setup. And there's some serious investment funds at stake here. She opened as follows. People say you can see the Great Wall of China from space. You can't. But what you can see is this. Up comes a giant photo on the screen of thousands and thousands, literally mountains of used car tires on fire. You could sense the reaction from the audience, and there was almost a discernible gasp, giving her the opportunity, of course, then to hammer home the relatability of this. Every year we burn hundreds of millions of tires needlessly because now, it's a very different way of opening, isn't it, from trying to describe a complex scientific chemical process for the recycling, right? It's much more relatable. Was it a Trivial Pursuit question, that one about what's the one man-made object you can see from space, the Great Wall of China? Don't know, but the point is, it's quite hard to lose someone with an opening that's as relatable as that. So that's one way of doing it. You focus in on the most relatable aspect of the problem that your idea is seeking to tackle, and then position it in language and frame it in a way that anybody could understand, could get their head around. I think no matter what age or background, that kind of opening is going to make some kind of sense. Now, the second example, it comes from Hans Rosling, wonderful educator, academic, died just a few years ago now. But he gave, you may have come across some of his talks. If you haven't already, they're well worth checking out. What made his name beyond the world of academia was a talk he gave in 2006, I think it was, at TED. And it was one of the first talks to be streamed alongside Ken Robinson and others on global health. And the idea and the key problem that he wanted to pinpoint, or he pinpoints in the talk, is the following. preconceived ideas, the problem of preconceived ideas. Notice that's quite abstract. And so his challenge was to find a way to make that relatable. I will put the link to the talk in the comment section below here so you can have a look at how he does that in the first minute or two. And you'll see that personal story is the vehicle that he uses to make this abstract idea relatable. And the impact it has on the audience, again, is tremendous. Have a look, you can judge for yourself, but it's another good example of how to make something potentially really quite complex, quite difficult to access, quite abstract, relatable and therefore meaningful to the audience. So there's a couple of examples for you. If you found this interesting, you've got any comments, questions, do pop them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you, and or give me a thumbs up if it's something that you found useful in some way, and we'll speak soon.